Senator Myrie. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are y'all doing?
Good, good. It's great to see you this evening. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I'm going to hand it over to Richard, who will start us off.
Great. Good evening, Senator. My name is Richard Berfolt. I'm one of the vice chairs of Citizens Union, and we're delighted you're able to join us this evening. Just a couple of introductory remarks, and I have a couple of short questions for you, and then we'll kick it off to the whole group.
Great.
First, as you know, Citizens Union is a 125-year-old organization dedicated to government ethics, good government, anti-corruption, and election reform, among our other issues. We are delighted to have you here tonight. We're going to ask you some questions. Hopefully you can keep your answers relatively brief, down to 2 or 3 minutes, so we can answer as many questions as possible. And we're hoping to resolve our process and come forward with our decision before the end of the month. So I have kind of a general question and a more specific question to open it up. The general question is, why are you the best choice for government reform and ethics reform and anti-corruption? Why are you the best candidate for our issues in terms of ethics reform? And then more specifically, I want to ask you your views on one of the issues where I think in your questionnaire you disagree with us, which is what's sometimes called open primaries, but is probably better described as a two-tier election process where all the candidates run in the first round and all the voters get to choose, and then a top two or top small number go to the general election. So if you could give us both your general position as to why you're the best candidate on ethics issues, and then talk a little bit more specifically about whether you're opposed, and if so, why, to the system of moving to a two-tier electoral system without closed party primaries. The floor is yours.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to try to confine my answer to the guidelines given. If you want me to go more into my bio, I'm happy to do that. But I want to get to the substance.
It's 2 questions. You can probably take 4 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Look, I think the best indication of where I will be on the reforms that you care about is what my record has been. And I was proud to serve as the chair of the elections committee on the outset of the new Democratic majority in the state legislature in 2019, where we tackled a lot of the election reforms, whether that was closing the LLC loophole, whether it was early voting, or whether it was a host of other changes that you had been fighting for many, many years. I have continued that fight even outside of my capacity as chair of elections with fighting against our pay-to-play operation that we have here in the state. I've introduced legislation that we've passed in the Senate that would ban campaign contributions from entities seeking contracts from the state. And as we have seen in many recent headlines, not having these restrictions have led to all of the outcomes that we don't want to see. I have also been talking about this as a candidate for mayor, whether it is holding our NYPD accountable for the massive overtime spending or increasing the resources for the Civilian Complaint Review Board, a CCRB that right now is under-resourced, that is not pegged to the PD budget as it is in some other larger jurisdictions, and a CCRB process that I have gone through myself. As someone who was pepper sprayed and improperly arrested by the PD and had to go to federal court instead of using the CCRB to get any vindication or any justice in that respect. As it relates to two-tier primaries, my reluctance and concern has largely been about what I view as potential gaming of the system, where there would be Republicans or someone of another party that would intentionally, I think, send voters to this system, not in good faith, but really in order to get a candidate of their choice. Now, I may be misinformed and maybe too closed in my thinking, no pun intended, on what the impacts of that might be, but would love to discuss further and would be open to conversation.
Let me just add one thought on that, and I know there are lots of questions to follow, which is, I think in our view, it's a way of empowering voters who are not registered in any party, which is a very large number of New Yorkers, to fully participate in the process through both stages. And that's, I think, where I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. That's, I think, where our concern is, one of our concerns.
No, Yeah, and I think that's incredibly valid. My understanding is that the recent data put out by New York City Votes shows that the largest growth has been in those unaffiliated voters, and I do think that it is important for us to be making things as accessible as possible. So I'd be willing to have some conversation on that. My concerns notwithstanding.
Thanks very much.
You got it.
David Browner.
Yeah. Senator, my name is David Browner, and my questions are in the area of ethics and corruption. I mean, if there's been a dominant vision of this administration, it has been a surge in investigations, indictments, resignations relating to ethical misconduct to a largely unprecedented degree, at least in the visible past. My interest is what, in your view, is the biggest weakness in city government structurally that has allowed this to happen. And by that, I mean to de-emphasize the issue of your personal rectitude in the question and direct your answer to what kinds of programs or changes you would have in mind to combat corruption and ensure that your administration avoids those ethical problems and is transparent.
Thank you. And it's an excellent question. I think that our system of no bid contracts is born out of a good intention to be efficient in emergent situations where you want to ensure that the service that is related to that contract is delivered in a quick manner if we are in an emergency. But what has happened, in my view, is that has been incredibly abused. And because of the lack of transparency in that process, and to a lesser but just as important extent, the larger contracting process, I think that the pay-to-play nature of this has been allowed to run rampant. And I think it is a doubly impacting problem because not only are we compromised as a government where the best bidder does not get the opportunity to serve, but oftentimes the victor is someone that actually doesn't have the expertise or the ability to execute on that contract, and New Yorkers end up suffering by being deprived of the right service. So I'd like to, within the first 100 days of my administration, do an examination of every no bid contract, and I'd like to see that process reformed going forward. I also think that there are some contracting issues within our Department of Education. My dad taught special education in the Bronx for 22 years and would often talk to me about how onerous and how much more expensive it was to go through the DOE system to purchase anything he needed than it was to do something else. And I'd like to examine that as well, because I believe, I say this without any substantive evidence, but I believe that system is ripe for corruption, and I'd like to examine that as well.
Thank you.
Ellen Baer.
Hi, my name is Ellen Baer. Hello, Senator. Nice to meet you.
Meet you.
So while we're talking about accountability, let's talk about power also. There has been something of a power struggle between the mayor and the city council of recent years, manifesting itself in everything from the budget to charter commission to appointments, advice and consent, and so on. And I was wondering if we could get your views on whether you think the balance of power between the executive and the legislative in the city now is appropriate, and if not, how would you change it? And also, sort of as a follow-up to that, how would you deal with the city council? How do you see yourself dealing with them?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, but because I'm someone that serves in the state legislative body, and we have a different dynamic with our executive. We have just come off of a budget that was the latest that it's been in 15 years, because constitutionally, the governor or the executive retains a lot of power over the budget process. And we have to, in many ways, acquiesce in spots that we might not otherwise do. Whereas on the local level here, that dynamic is not as strong as it relates to the budget, that there is, in fact, I think, real partnership that is necessary. So I actually think that the current balance in most respects is a good one. And of course, it depends on the occupant of the office about how well that functions. I would look at the city council as a former staffer, but as just a governing philosophy, as a partner in government, as someone and an entity that we should be working cohesively. I mean, we look at what's happening now with the sort of parallel tracks of the charter commissions. We look at what has happened on particular vetoes. We looked at what has happened on the requirement that city council members fill out a form to speak to agencies. This, to me, I think signals a dysfunction in government that is more reflective of the current occupant than it is of the system writ large. I plan to be very proactive in seeking a relationship with council members. Maybe that's in part because I'm a former staffer. It's also might be in part because I know a lot of the council members, but I think more importantly, that relationship that is constitutionally built with some tension because the executive, the mayor, has to look at the citywide impact, and that is not the duty of the individual council member, should not be at odds. And I think there's an expectation from New Yorkers that we work together in as many ways as possible, and that is the posture that I plan to adopt as mayor.
Eleanor?
Hello, Senator. How are you? Nice to see you. So, when you look at the city of New York, it's so massive. It's, there are more than 300,000 employees. There are, more than 8 million people there. And all of these people who live in the city care about the crime, they care about making sure that the garbage is picked up. They worry about their schools. How would you run this city? How would you manage this city? I mean, I know you've managed your office, in Albany, but this is, leagues ahead of that. How would you do it?
Yeah, and this is, I think, the ultimate expectation that New Yorkers have of the mayor is not that they're always going to agree with the policy outcome, but that they will agree that there has been a process and that the management is at the forefront of that process. I am a fan of the model that says, look, it is not my job to be the director of operations for every city agency. That is not feasible, and I think that it is not the best way for our government to run. Who I appoint and who I hire, those are going to be my most important decisions as a manager of this city. And we have already seen that when those appointments are based on political loyalty, when they are based on cronyism, that has a really terrible impact on New Yorkers. So I'm probably going to be speaking to 10 to 12 people every single day that are going to help me run this city. And that is inclusive of my first deputy mayor.
I mean, you're not going to hire your political friends and your relatives. So what qualifications will these employees have?
My litmus test is going to be whether you have subject matter expertise, and that shouldn't have to be a part of the test, but we've seen leadership appointed that does not have that. A love for the city the way that I love this city, and then you have to be aligned with my values. That doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on everything, or that you have to even share where I am politically or from a partisan standpoint. But you have to have had demonstrated ability to lead and think outside of the box. I want to get help in doing this. Part of being a good leader is knowing what you don't know. And I plan to convene committees that are composed of public and private sector subject matter experts that are going to help me with the search for my commissioners and my deputy mayors. And get some submissions of names, both within the city and outside of the city, and then I ultimately make that selection. I want the best person, and it shouldn't. Again, I know that this perhaps seems a little trite to say, but that isn't always the case. And in my qualifications, the type of people that I want are the people that are going to be able to execute my vision. Being able to let them have agency and to do the job that they were hired to do is not always the case either. And that is something that I plan to do. My style of management is not one of micromanaging. It is one of empowering and allowing them to do that job. Of course, the major policy decisions will be up to me as the mayor, but I plan to let people do their jobs.
Thank you.
Lolita, do you want to follow up?
Yes, so as a follow-up, hello, Senator, my name is Lita Jackson, sorry. As a follow-up to that question, in addition to what you just laid out as far as how to recruit, there are people that you may want to keep from past administrations or people that you just would like to retain. They're long-serving civil servants who have really the knowledge of how to run the city. And how do you have any specific plans, I should say, to help retain people who are already working for the city?
There are a couple of individuals right now that I think are doing a good job, or who have started off on the right foot. I think that the current police commissioner has taken some really important steps that I think the public has seen the impact on, and it is the type of leadership that I'd like to see in our not only our police agency but in some of our others. And I think on the Department of City Planning, I have admired the work that Chair Dan Garodnick has done, someone who has an appreciation for the political dynamics that are requisite in our city politics, but also someone with deep policy knowledge and substantive knowledge and the ability to do the work that is often painstaking. So I am open to keeping people who have done the right thing, but I'm also aware of the dynamic that there can be some calcification of imagination, where people just do things because that's the way that it's always been done. And we got to shake things up a little bit, and I'm not going to be afraid to do that, not to shake things up for shaking them up's sake. But to do so in a way that is going to best serve New Yorkers. And so in addition to what I was mentioning to Eleanor, I think there is going to be an element of looking at individuals who have been, and I'd love if they would like to continue to stay, to be able to stay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Wong. Let me ask you the next question. What will your approach be with engaging with the Trump administration and President Trump, especially in areas where the federal government may try to pressure New York City, let's say immigration, law enforcement, Medicaid, and a whole host of other things?
Thank you for the question, David. I have very strong feelings about this, but in part because of the focus on immigration, and I'm the son of two immigrants who came to this city for the same reason that most people come here. I was a very sick child. I had a bad asthma when I was young and eczema. They took me to Kings County Hospital quite often, and they did so without fear of deportation because they knew that the city would have their back. And what we have seen coming out of this federal administration and the subsequent response or lack thereof from this mayoral administration has been disgusting. I'm not going to equivocate there. So I plan on being a responsible mayor that works with the president when it is in the best interest of New York City. And I plan to be a responsible mayor that stands up to this president when he is attacking the things that make this city great. I want to hire more lawyers for our law department so that we can utilize the 10th Amendment in a more offensive way. I think that the proposed cuts from this president, absent congressional action, are unconstitutional, and I think that we should be fighting tooth and nail in court. Now, if the Congress votes for these cuts and they are within their in their constitutional bounds, then that's a tougher conversation that we have to have with our partners in the state legislature on what are the holes that we're going to be able to fill. The truth is, if as proposed, these cuts go through, and I'm cautiously optimistic that they won't go through as proposed, but should they go through as proposed, we're going to be facing some real challenges for our safety net hospitals that depend almost exclusively on Medicaid reimbursements, for our food pantries that depend almost exclusively on federal nutritional assistance, and our Title I schools who may be facing drastic cuts if the Department of Education is cut as proposed. I'm prepared to take him to court as often as possible, to work with my colleagues in government, but to also utilize the bully pulpit. This is the media capital of the world. We don't have to merely respond to public opinion. I get to shape public opinion as mayor, and I plan to do so in making it clear to New Yorkers that these federal cuts or whatever illegal actions by this administration will have deep impacts here in the city.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And this is Alan Rothstein. Hi, nice to meet you, Senator. On your questionnaire, you didn't quite respond to who you think should be the final decision maker on discipline in the NYPD. We know you're familiar with this issue, very familiar with this issue, so I wonder what your views are on that.
Yeah, and sorry for that that confusion. You know, I have, and I think y'all know this, have sponsored a bill in the state legislature for many years that would allow for the arbiter of police disciplinary proceedings as related to misconduct to be an oath judge and not a judge on the NYPD payroll that is effectively an assistant commissioner. I wanted that because I don't feel that areas of misconduct should have someone that is both judge and jury with I think to be a conflict of interest. And that holds true with the disciplinary process as well. When you have a good police commissioner, you of course want the police commissioner to be the person that has the last word. And I plan to have a good police commissioner. But structurally going forward, you know, I think that I would be open to conversation on who that ultimate arbiter should be. In the cases of civilian complaints, I think that should not be within the police department. But when it does not entail a civilian, then I think that I'm more open to conversation on what that would look like.
So I'm sorry, I missed a little bit of that. So who do you want to make the final decision in the civilian complaint area?
So I would want that to be a judge, not on the police payroll.
A judge?
Correct.
A judge. So how would
this would be like an administrative judge.
I see. Not the CCRB.
Well, so my understanding is that the CCRB process, ultimately the judge, or what is called a judge, is someone who's actually an assistant police commissioner that is paid for. That may just be my own misunderstanding.
Well, it's one of the people on the panel, but it's a small minority of the members of the board of the CCRB. Anyway.
Okay, well, Alan, that is my misunderstanding that I would need some clarity on. But philosophically, I don't think in the case of a civilian that the PD should have the final word on that.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yep.
I'll jump in with another question, Senator. This is about the relationship. We talked about the relationship with the city council. So this is about the relationship with the governor. Another relationship that has been, you know, collaborative at times and confrontational at other times. And, you know, particularly given the role that the governor plays in our city and city governance. So what will your approach be to engaging the governor to achieve all your goals and programs?
Yeah, you have said it, Ben. We have lived through just in the past 2 administrations, and setting aside that one of the more antagonistic relationships might end up being reversed with a certain candidate in this race. We have seen what it looks like when a governor is not invested in the well-being of the city and more invested in petty grievances. New Yorkers are the ones that ultimately suffer. I believe in collaboration first. If there are disagreements, the disagreements will be based on what I believe to be things that are detrimental to the city. Part of the frustration that I have had with this current administration is that they were not invested in making the city's case to the legislature and the governor. What the interest from the beginning has been, to me, more about a show than it has been about execution. So much so that the intergovernmental office for this current mayoral administration didn't have a legislative liaison, or not one that was consistent for the first 2 years of the administration. And so you come to the legislature only on 10 Cup Day to make the request and the budgetary request, and then we don't hear from you, we don't see you at all. I plan to do things very differently. I, of course, am going to have a good relationship with the governor, and I plan to do that when it's in the best interest of the city. But legislators, because they're going to have a role in influencing what happens in Albany. And in the same way that I want to make early overtures to the city council members, I want to do the same for the members of the legislature in New York City, so that when there are tough votes or where there are places where there might be some disagreement with the executive, that I can also have some other allies making the case for the city.
Thank you, Senator. Richard, do you want to close us up?
There was one area we didn't
You're
to.
on
The
Richard, hold on, David.
what?
You're on mute, Richard.
David, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I don't think we've gotten to questions concerning city council, the mayor's bumping of city council charter revision, and the question of advice and consent in the city council on mayoral appointments. And given that this is the last of the evening, maybe we've got a couple of more minutes to explore those.
Right. So maybe I can flesh those out. So one question we've been asking is, what have you, the council has periodically raised the question of having the power of advice and consent, obviously, for certain mayoral appointments that were currently the mayor can just make the appointment. So we're curious about your views on that. And second is an issue that has come up is the ability of the mayor through the appointment of charter revision commissions to block the council's efforts to seek charter change. Obviously, there's a mayoral charter commission now. There was one last year. This mayor has abused it, but he's not the only one. All recent mayors appear to have abused this process. So if you give your thoughts about what should be the role of the council, what changes you might see in the council's advice and consent to mayoral appointees, and what any changes you might see in the mayor's power to bump a council initiative through a mayoral charter commission.
So I think an earlier question got at this more broadly, not as narrowly, but asking my thoughts on what the current structure is in relationship between the branches. And as someone that I'm hoping to have accountability to the voters, the current structure to me is one that makes sense. I think that there are a category of appointments that the voters expect for me to make, and that they're going to be voting for me based on what my vision for those policies are. And I'd like to be able to be held accountable for that, and not to be able to, if someone questions where we are on public safety or on education or something else, for me to sort of point the finger and say, well, this was a collective appointment or process. If this public is dissatisfied with my choices in those areas, we have a democratic process by which they can express that dissatisfaction and get someone else in the role. But that is not to say that I don't plan on working closely with the city council on a host of other issues. And, I don't think that the mayor should be in the business of knocking, the city council's attempts at getting or convening charter commissions. I think that is, to me, a demonstration of this current administration's dysfunction and bad relationship with the city council, I'm hoping that any changes that we're making to the charter are going to be based in trying to get to better policies and in making adjustments. You know, one of the things that I mentioned earlier about contracting reform might require some changes in the city charter. That is something that I'd like to have the ability to do if that is necessitated. But my hope is that I would be able to do that in conjunction and not in contention with the city council.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we've had a very good discussion tonight. So we really appreciate your taking your time to joining us, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Would you like to make a final, maybe this is an opportunity for you to make any kind of final statement you would like to make?
And if I can just and if I can just ask in your final statement, if you can add what is your path to victory?
Okay, so I wanted to say just thank you for the work that you do and constantly holding us accountable. I was honored to have your support as a state Senate candidate back in 2018, and it meant a lot to me then, and it would mean a lot to me in this moment right now. I think particularly when there's an expectation from New Yorkers that we have a government of integrity, a government that is well run, a government that runs in the interest of the people and not in the politics and the power. And we are in an existential moment, frankly, for the integrity of our government. Just this week, as many of you know, subject to a complaint that I made last week to the Campaign Finance Board, Andrew Cuomo was denied close to $700,000 in funding for trying to, I think, undermine our democracy. And I think the public needs to be very clear on who is standing up for our democracy in this moment and who is in this for their own ambition. And I have been squarely on the side of standing up for our democracy. I have raised the requisite resources to communicate to voters when they are paying attention, which is starting to begin now. And I believe that our record and who I am as a born and raised New Yorker appeals to the most constituencies and will get on the most ballots. And in a ranked choice voting world, that to me is what is going to be key. And we, I think, have demonstrated that we are serious about this job. We are serious about public service. And in a moment where people are seeing headline after headline, distraction after distraction, someone who has been serious about legislating and communicating to voters, I think is what people are looking for in this moment.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you tonight. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.